This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 108 of the Dressage Radio Show, brought to you with the generous support of Equestrian Collections, Charles Owen and Kentucky Performance Products. Chris Stafford back with you this week for another episode of News and Views from around the dressage world, not least of all from the other side of the pond, where we're going to hear from Alice Collins this week, who is the dressage editor of Horse and Hound. She's going to be bringing us regular reports here on the show of what's happening in Europe. We're also going to hear from a great friend here on the Dressage Radio Show, Heather Blitz. This week she's going to be telling us a little bit more about the language of dressage and explaining her interpretation of that as she talks with one of her long-standing students, Linda Holsty. And we're also going to hear from Fran Summerlin-Histed, who has been involved with the relief effort for the tornado victims in Alabama. She is with the Birmingham Dressage and Combined Training Association. But first of all, I want to introduce you to Alice Collins, who, as I said, she is the dressage editor of Horse and Hound, and she's been obviously keeping abreast of what's happening, not just in England, but also how the British riders have been faring in Europe. Alice, welcome to the Dressage Radio Show. Delighted to have you on board as part of our continued coverage from Horse and Hound contributors. You, as I said in the introduction, you are the editor of Dressage, a big task, and so you must be a dressage buff.
Yes, that's true. I'm guilty.
Guilty as charged.
Indeed.
Well, there's an awful lot of exciting things going on in British dressage these days. I mean, the growth of it has been absolutely amazing. And not least of all, you know, the team that you've had that keeps impressing around the world. And I think it also made a little bit of history the other day in Wiesbaden when Laura Bechtolsheimer and Mistral's Horace actually beat Totilas, the world record holder. Now, talk about making headlines.
In the qualifier for the special, yeah. She went one better than we all feared, and yes, she managed to beat Totilas and his new rider, Matthias Alexander Rath. So everybody's very excited about that and the prospects for Alf looking forward towards the Europeans and the Olympics.
Well, yes, so there's so much depth to the British team these days, of course, and as we said, beat Totilas in the qualifier there, but then actually Totilas has got his own back. I think Matthias is finally getting the best of Totilas and came back and beat her in...
Yes, Totilas definitely looked more polished in the special. And Laura had a couple of problems in the one-time changes down the centre line between the pirouettes, which I think was costly for her, and ended up losing by about a mark and a half out to Totilas. But, you know, both combinations still have things that they can improve on and ways that they can improve those scores, which makes for really exciting competition looking forward.
It is exciting, as I said, you know, and being an expat, I watch from this side of the pond as the rise and rise of British dressage. Now, you cover it not just at international level, but obviously on the domestic scene as well. Tell us a little bit more about what's been happening on the domestic front.
Recently, we've had two big shows in the UK. We've had the Somerford Park Premier League, where actually in both the Premier League shows there and Wellington, the outstanding horses have been in the young horse classes rather than the Grand Prix. The Grand Prix has been a lot of faces that we already know because many of our top riders are competing abroad at the Grand Prix level at the moment because of, you know, chasing Olympic qualification scores. So at Somerford Park Premier League, it was really a 5-year-old horse called Bubbling, who was ridden by Jill Davidson, that really impressed us. The horse is out of her husband's old Olympic mare, and by Ling, so you know, bred to do the job certainly. And he took the international class with Jill Davison at Somerford Park. But the other one definitely of note was Andrew Gould, who was riding Mitchell Santorini Hit. It was a grey gelding by Sandro Hit. He won the PSG at Somerford Park. And then very shortly afterwards took the horse over to Compiègne in France for Andrew's first ever international performance and won the Inter One freestyle, which he was over the moon about.
Well, it's interesting, as I said, the growth of British dressage and the successes at international level, it has to come from somewhere. And if it's coming from the foundation, there's more and more competitions there and leagues. And you're so much more established at national level now, aren't you, Alice, over there with the depth of competition?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're finding that our riders and horses combinations are now also doing well abroad. It's not just a question of them being successful nationally and then going and coming in the top 30 abroad. They're now actually winning. Another combination to prove that is Gareth Hughes riding Classic Sandman, who went abroad recently for the first time and did 2 plus 71% at Grand Prix level, winning both the classes. That was despite getting lost on their way to the show and having to be escorted in by mounted police to the showground.
Unfortunate start.
Yes. And of course, the other one to mention is Richard Davidson, who won a 5-star Grand Prix in Munich at the beginning of June with his relatively young horse Artemis, which is another combination that we're really excited about looking forward. And in the same competition, Emma Hindle came 4th on her new horse, Brisbane, who's a son of Purcell's Briar, and she was 4th behind the 3 Germans. But the interesting thing about that was the judges' marks were actually quite disparate. There was one judge that had her on about the 65 mark and one that had her on 71 in second place just behind Totalas. So it'll be interesting to see how the scoring works with that horse moving forward, because he travels a lot quite forward when he's in the piaffe due to the way that he moves. And I think that that's a split opinion with the judges, so it'll be an interesting one to keep our eye out on.
Well, you've mentioned several names there that we're familiar with, but also a lot of new names that would be new to our listeners around the world there, Alice, because, they haven't made the team yet, and obviously that's where you get the recognition so much internationally. But it's amazing the depth you've got there. You're talking about a lot of horses, well-bred horses. The depth and the breadth is amazing there. I mean, it has to be exciting for British dressage and also for the international scene too, that, we're really broadening the playing field, aren't we?
Absolutely. I mean, another homebred prospect, when I say homebred, it's British-bred horse called Woodlander Farouche, who's by the late First Heinrich out of a mare, who's by a stallion that stands in the UK called Keystone DiMaggio. She's called Woodlander Farouche, and she won the 5-year-old class at Wellington Riding Premier League, and she won it with a whopping 98%.
Wow! 98%?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, with the young horse classes, you get 5 marks, one for each of the 3 paces, one for ability to lengthen and shorten, and one for the balance and attitude. And the lowest mark that the mare achieved over all 5 scores was 9.5. So, as you can see, this is a horse that we're all really excited about over here, and I think that she'll now be heading to Verdun for the young horse championship.
For the young horse championship, yeah. I mean, wow, the world better be paying attention to British dressage, Alice. I think at that rate, that's very exciting. And you have, as you mentioned, there's leagues there. There's the Wellington League. You mentioned a couple of leagues there. Are you seeing more development of these leagues as a way of promoting, the progression up through, and regionally, of course?
Well, they're not so much leagues in themselves as a name given to a level of show, and it gives you an idea of the sort of competition, the quality of competition that you can expect at a show like that. They're quite big atmospheres, the scores are high, the horses and the riders, the quality is very, very high. So it's a really good opportunity to get horses out, introduce them to flowers and banners and judges and boxes and banners and tents, and a lot of people use them for their young horses to get them out and seeing new things in the world. But these shows traditionally tend to have classes up to Grand Prix as well, to bring in people at all levels, and tend to be really high standard.
Are you seeing, Alice, an increase in or in a breadth of quality? I mean, not just the growth of British breeding for dressage now, and that you're not buying so much from continental Europe. Is that depth in quality, or is that just for the elite riders and the high-performance competitors?
No, I'd say it's permeating through the levels, and it's helped very much by a scheme that we have in this country, which is organised by the British Equestrian Federation, the BEF, which is called the Futurity. Now, Futurity is a series of young horse evaluations, and they evaluate over the 3 main disciplines and some endurance as well, and that's for horses from foals to 3-year-olds inclusive. And so, for example, with the dressage horses, Woodlander Farouche came through the VEF Futurity and was awarded a first premium as a foal. And this is a way of identifying young horse talent. It's only open to British-bred horses, which is, to be honest, a slightly complex definition. But anyway, it's only open to British-bred horses, and it's a way of identifying them and helping nurture them up through the levels. And this year there's a new initiative to link those horses who've done well in the Futurity, called the Equine Bridge, to top riders, to ensure that these horses that have the potential do hopefully go on and fulfill it under saddle.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, what an amazing, just an amazing, growth and development of the sport over there. Very, very impressive. And we're going to look forward to your ongoing reports here, Alice, on the Dressage Radio Show.
Yes, certainly.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Good luck, and enjoy your dressage.
Thank you very much.
And before we get to our next guest this week, I want to remind you about Equestrian Collections, because every time you shop on their website at equestriancollections.com, you can earn points for you and your riding and the riding organisation of your choice. This is Equestrian Collections' way of rewarding its valued customers and supporting the equestrian community. For every $1 you spend at equestriancollections.com, you will earn 1 point, and each time you accumulate 500 points, you'll receive a $25 reward certificate that's redeemable at equestriancollections.com. And you can collect rewards for your horse and celebrate his special day with a $10 reward certificate, which is emailed to you during the month of your horse's birthday. So that's redeemable, of course, at equestriancollections.com. And you can find all of your favourite dressage brands like Rumph International, Kerritts, Fitz and Good Rider, all on their website at equestriancollections.com, which has everything dressage for both you and your horse. So check them all out, equestriancollections.com. And we would like to thank equestriancollections.com for being a participating retailer of the Horse World Gives Back campaign. And if you're a regular listener to the show, you will know that we have been supporting the Horse World Gives Back campaign here on the Horse Radio Network. We held a radiothon a couple of weeks ago now, raising funds for the victims of the extreme weather around the country here, for tornado victims, for fire, wildfire, and the flooding that's taken place across this country this spring. And part of that effort has obviously been included. We included a lot of people around the country as we spoke to them during that radiothon. And, of course, one area that has been badly affected is Alabama. And in Alabama, the Birmingham Dressage and Combined Training Association has stepped up to help with that tornado relief. And I got the opportunity to catch up with Fran Summerlin-Histed, who has been leading that relief effort. Well, hi, Fran. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
Well, I know that you're in a particularly hot part of the country down there in Alabama with the Birmingham Dressage and Combined Training Association, as I said in my introduction. You've been a member for some years, haven't you? You're a very active member.
Yes, I've been an active member for over 30 years.
Well, and you combine, as I say, dressage and combined training. So you've got, what kind of membership there? How many would you have tops in that area?
I believe we have about 100 to 125 members this year. Our membership runs along with the USDF year. Of course, we're a GMO member of USDF. And our membership runs between 80 and 125, and it's a very active membership.
And, of course, like all GMOs, relies so much on volunteers. And now, do you host shows and clinics like most GMOs, Fran?
We do. We have 2 shows per year, one in the spring and one in the fall. We had a very successful spring show this year. And we are planning a show in September. We have clinics with well-known instructors. We had a clinic with Kyle Carter last year, which was great fun. And we are having an introduction to eventing clinic this year in October, which will actually be free to our members and a small charge for non-members. It is for education and safety in eventing. so that people can get an idea about what eventing's all about and how to go about properly training for it.
Really useful. Great. And so the reason why we've got you on, of course, we have GMOs on the show and always want to hear from more GMOs around the country. You can obviously call me, email me with any reports from competitions too. And as I want to remind you all, if you're with a GMO, to drop me an email about that. But the reason we've got you on, particularly at this time, Fran, is because you've been involved with the tornado relief effort, and I think you've been heading up that initiative, haven't you, down there in Alabama?
Yes, I have. I've been coordinating the mission, and it has been extremely successful. We have really gotten so many kind donors and so many supplies that we have already passed out to the tornado victims. We continue to. I believe there were 2 trips, maybe 3 trips, for donations today, and we're just continuing to try to provide people with horses and pets things that they need. We are trying to specifically find people who have needs so that they might be able to bring their horses home or refence their pastures, have facilities for their dogs, cats, whatever.
And, of course, we should explain that those listeners around the world would put this in context. The tornadoes that come through the states or have been coming through the states this year has been a particularly devastating season. And Alabama has often been so badly hit, isn't it? You really are right in the middle there, aren't you, Fran?
We sure are. We had, Alabama has always had tornadoes, but nothing in my recollection like this year. We had a horrible outbreak on April 27th that we had many, many long-running, very strong tornadoes, F3s to F5s, which were horribly destructive all over our state. And it's been very, very devastating for so many here in Alabama.
Can you quantify how many horses were lost? Has that sort of figure been tallied at this point, Fran, or is it just a guess from talking to people how many people have actually lost horses in the tornadoes?
I do not know the official loss. I know that there have been many. Personally, I know of, maybe 6 horses, 7 horses that were lost just locally. And all over the state, I really don't know. I'm sure the number is quite high. And many cattle, horses, dogs, cats, donkeys, so many were lost in this outbreak.
Absolutely devastating. And you're there to obviously rally with support that you can give to those victims, as indeed we did here on the Horse Radio Network. If you were able to tune in on June the 6th, you will know that we had a radiothon to raise funds for those in need and that have suffered from the effects of devastating weather in the continental USA. And that horseworldgivesback.com website is where you can continue to go to donate and help. And I know, Fran, it's one of those things that'll always be someone in need, won't there? And the season is not quite over yet, is it? I mean, how far into the summer would you expect tornadoes in Alabama?
Well, we will have tornadoes, probably a few all during the summer, but in the fall we'll have another. In the fall and the early winter, we'll have another strong tornado season. But we not only have to worry about that. Of course, we have started hurricane season this June 1st, and so of course we have to worry about that as well. And then the flooding has been just horrible here in the South and in the Midwest as well. So it's just been a horrible season for natural disasters, actually. And we will also the help for the tornado victims and the flooding victims will go on because this is a long-term effort. It doesn't go away in the first few weeks. It takes people years to get back to normal. So we are trying to emphasize that to donors and let them know that we're in it for the long haul, and we're going to try to help people as long as we can.
Well, that's wonderful, and I know our hearts go out to you down there because you, as you said, you get it in every which way with the weather. It really is very unkind to Alabama, but I hope you can enjoy a calm before the next storm down there, Fran, and we will put a link on our website so anybody down in your area wants to get involved and help with that tornado relief effort for the Birmingham Dressage and Combined Training Association. Fran is the point person, and we will put a link to their website on our website. Fran, thank you for joining us this week, and the very best of luck with this effort, and hopefully you'll be able to provide relief for those in need for some time to come.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the help that y'all have provided to our community through your Horse Radio Network.
And a reminder that our campaign, The Horse World Gives Back, here on the Horse Radio Network is ongoing. You can go to the website at horseworldgivesback.com and continue to support the victims around the country. Well, we're coming now to our next guest this week, of course, is a regular here on the Dressage Radio Show. Heather Blitz is usually my co-host, but time was short this week, so she just stopped by with a friend of hers, someone who's been a student here of long standing with Heather, and they're going to talk about dressage language and Heather's interpretation of dressage language. But before we get to these two guests this week, I want to remind you about one of our loyal sponsors here, and that is, of course, Kentucky Performance Products. It's that time of the year when your horse will be sweating more and more and needs some help in replenishing fluids. KPP offers a solution with Summer Games electrolytes. Originally created for horses competing at the Olympic Games, this formulation is a combination of minerals similar to the levels typically lost in sweat. Summer Games is a concentrated electrolyte that contains minimal sugar and supports normal hydration. Plus, it's palatable and easy to feed. Help your horse beat the heat then with this summer with Summer Games electrolyte. You can find out more about this and all of the KPP products by visiting their website at kppusa.com, or you can call 1-800-772-1988. And to learn more about horse nutrition and interact with the KPP experts, you can join their Facebook fan page. Well, as I said, my next guest is a good friend here of the Dressage Radio Show, Heather Blitz, and she has with her a student of hers this week, Linda Holsty. So let's hear from them and the language of dressage. Well, hi, Heather. Welcome back to the show. You're usually my co-host, but this time you're just going to dip in and out and talk about a little training segment with one of your students.
Well, thanks for having me back, Chris. It's good to be back. It's been a little while. And, I've got a student of mine for a number of years, at least the past maybe 10 years now, I'm not sure. Linda Holsty from Franklin, Tennessee, and known her for a while, and she's on the call with us today.
Well, welcome to the show, Linda.
Thank you. Hello.
Nice to have you on the show. I know that you obviously work with Heather closely, and I believe you guys want to talk about something that is, an ongoing language of the dressage lessons. And is there something in particular, Heather?
Well, I think one of the things that I really try to pay a lot of attention to in being an effective instructor and helping people learn how to ride is the awareness of what language does, both on how it comes out of my mouth and how it goes into the rider's ears. And it's a big deal in trying to, get concepts across. This is such a living art that we're all trying to perfect, and putting any kind of instructions on how to be a better artist really is a real challenge. So we were just going to talk with Linda a little bit about some lessons that we had recently that she had, and some things just really hit a great note with her. She really kind of understood some words in a way. I'm just going to let her kind of talk about the last sort of advances she got in her last few lessons.
Well, I wanted to be able to share this because it's been so meaningful and powerful, and probably I would back up for the last, however many months, going back to February, March. I had the fortune of my horse being with Heather for a couple months and me coming and going and having some concentrated lessons, and whether it was that, whether it's this particular horse or his training or something just finally sinking through and hitting home to me, but it's been a very exciting experience and now journey to all of a sudden begin to understand some of the terms that I've been hearing for a long time. And I kept a journal over the years of all of my lessons with Heather, and I've gone back to review my comments, and I find that many of the same words were used years ago, but now they mean something to me. Slingshot and light in your stirrups and being still in the saddle and moving the horse's particles around. And I probably could have told you with fervor 2 years ago that I understood what these things mean, and perhaps in 2 years I'll develop another awareness of them. But right now I feel I'm in the discovery zone in which I'm finding out how effective many of these descriptions mean, and I hear the words, and I can oftentimes do them, and I see an effect in my horse that has just been really quite phenomenal for me. So anyway, that's just been a great opportunity, and I think it's a combination of spending a lot of time watching Heather ride and associating the term with what I see that she is doing, watching other people ride, going from right to wrong, and of course my own experience in seeing and feeling the difference in my horse. And it's an awareness. It's not just body awareness, but it's also the awareness of the effectiveness of of a particular action.
Well, Heather,
you've already said,
Heather, can I just jump in real quick there? Because I think for the people who don't know your style of communicating and the language that you use, and I've become familiar with it, and the first thing I've noticed with it is that it is not the common language of teaching. It's not the traditional heels down, head up, eyes ahead, hand, elbows in. It's not those typical commands that you see echoed around. So give us a little bit of background to that, Heather, would you, as to why you got to the language that you have and why you use it?
Well, I guess I never have been a very traditional, conventional-minded person in my life since I was in grade school. I think I used to butt heads with my grade school teachers. And I guess I've just never followed those traditional phrases in dressage. You mentioned some other common ones are, to sit deep, use your feet, the phrase half halt. A lot of things that, once you've become an accomplished rider, those words make sense. But before you've become an accomplished rider or you've learned to get to that point of feeling those things in your horse, those are just words. And, when I started taking dressage lessons as a teenager, I was told all those words too, and they just never hit a level where my body knew what to do when I heard those words. And like a lot of people, I think, that might hear the word half halt, either spoken to them or yelled at them louder if they don't do it, and then maybe they just start to feel like they are a hopeless case or they're just not smart enough or whatever, even though you can understand the words, they just don't hit a level of making a physical response in either your own body or even better in your horse's body, that you're looking for something that's this elusive connection and trueness. The words get really difficult. So the traditional language, I think, makes a whole lot of sense. Like I said, ride the horse from back to front. Connection, trueness, half halt, things that you would find in almost any text no one could argue with. But to get to those points, to get to those things, Using those words themselves aren't really that helpful for riders if they don't know what they mean. So, I've worked with a lot with Mary Wanless, and she's such an amazing educator. I don't think it would matter what subject she was trying to teach to somebody. She would do it better than anybody that I can imagine. She's an amazing educator. She studied teaching in depth. And I've gotten the fortune in my life of having met her and learned teaching methods from her, and a lot of it has to do with language and communicating things that need to go into the student's mind and into the student's ear and actually hit a physical response. So, yeah, Linda, you mentioned some things like slingshot, you mentioned that, and moving horses' particles around. And, I mean, my lessons and others who have also, of course, learned from Mary end up sounding, I mean, it's kind of like it's completely out of the box what kind of language you can use. And there's just something in Linda's body that happens if her horse gets on the forehand or he gets strong in her hand. We can imagine like his body has a bunch of particles on the inside, and if the particles are all too concentrated towards the front of the horse's body, then she has to use her thighs and her pelvis in a way like she's trying to pull back on a slingshot, like if her seat was the stone of a slingshot. And it was pulling it back to stay back behind the thigh. She can have some kind of power to bring particles more back in his body. So it can sound a lot like that's something that we talk about a lot in her lessons. Linda, what else did you mention? We said, sitting really still. Like, what does that mean to you? What do you think about or what does it feel like when you get that hitting a physical level?
Yeah, sitting still is staying back, and core strength, and the coffee press, being down in the saddle, and certainly engaging your inner core so that the horse isn't moving you around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, diaphragm down, arm cuffs, hip cuffs. That means
all
quite
kinds
a bit
of things.
to me. Yeah,
right.
And instead of keep your shoulders back, or or in a certain posture, round back or hollow back riders, and a half halt is slingshot and hip cuffs and not being involved. And it's just those words mean something to me instead of it just being an ethereal term.
Well, and the thing is also, Chris, you were asking why not the traditional language, because traditional language is also sort of geared just towards a mass audience, assuming that audience, that everyone in that audience is starting from the same place. And Linda just said, some hollow back riders or some are round back riders. Some people do need to have their shoulders more back, but that might be 1 out of 20 people that you're talking to. So, lessons that really are tailor-made towards each individual rider is what it's got to be about. And the things that Linda's just not discussing that we work on her lessons, they might not be something that would come up in the lesson following the same day with another rider. It just has to be like tailor-made to that rider's body and where their starting place is. And like we all want to get to the same ending point where we are toned and elastic and still and balanced and, not interfering with our horses, yet effective and making the things happen that we also have as goals for them. But everybody starts from a different place. Everyone's body is different. Everyone's mind is different. Everyone has to overcome different hurdles. So Linda's talking exactly about the things that are really important for her to get to a place of having her horse get more connected and through and balanced and engaged and collected. And it really worked for her. And there have just been some phrases that have, just since I saw her last weekend in the clinic, it was really fantastic because I use an analogy of her being like a carousel pole and her horse being a carousel horse. And I've been using that for maybe just trying that out a little bit for, 5 years or something. And it never really was that, it didn't really hit a level where I saw her do something. If I said, be a carousel pole, I didn't really see what I wanted to see, so I didn't use that a whole lot. But this last weekend, she got this light bulb. She goes, oh, that's what a carousel pole feels like. So that word then in her brain didn't just stay at a word level. It actually sank to a brain level or a physical level. And there's a phrase like when the penny drops. It's like all of a sudden it makes sense. When you get a physical response in your body from hearing a certain phrase or word, then that's the phrase or word that you've got to use to keep that thing happening. And that's why language, I think, just has to be so, it has to be completely out of the box. You have to use phrases that may not sound at all like what I could put in print, because I wouldn't think it was for every writer. And they might say, what in the world is that? And it might not be for every writer who's reading a certain article or a book. So it makes writing or even discussing publicly like this, what the best kind of tactics for each writer to go out and practice with their horses. It makes it a little challenging because I really think it's different for everybody. I think our goal and our end goal really is the same. We all want straightness, suppleness, rhythm, relaxation, collection. We all want that, and happy horses. So, and we all want riders to be, like I said, balanced and toned and still and out of the horse's way and effective. We all want that. But getting us all and all of our horses to that same end goal it's just very different path, very different map for every horse and every rider. So, Linda's lesson last week was a thing that just kind of made me decide to talk about this on the show this week, because it's a really important thing to think about.
Well, the one thing I would like to point out for those who don't know your style, Heather, is that you are a very good communicator, basically. And by using these analogies, these are really your tools, your effective communication tools, aren't they? And while they may not be conventional dressage language, they are a language that that individual rider can relate to. And Linda, I'd like to bring you back in now, because it's obviously over a period of time you've got used to the language, but there's still those moments of, when the penny drops. What did you find was interesting when you first started working with Heather that made it different and made it work for you?
Well, back then when I started, it was probably the black and whiteness of it, that instead of it being some or obscure just art or concept that, yes, half halt and use your back and throughness. It was broken down into pieces that allowed me to be successful. So they were simple exercises, but there was a clear path, like we start here and we go to there, and this is what you do first. And certainly you don't learn the complexity and the breadth of everything, but they were building blocks. And the training pyramid, for example, the forward, the rhythm, the suppleness, the straightness, all of that, I think in theory sounds fantastic. But when you're struggling to understand it, there really aren't tools. Heather gave me tools, and she still does, and the tools are becoming more meaningful to me. And it's not just as a rider in an equitation sense, but it's being effective to my horse.
Well, I wanted to come in with that, Heather, because obviously when you're giving clinics, it is a horse and rider situation, obviously, but there is a language that you communicate to the rider that enables them to apply those tools. And, a lot of people will be looking when they're teaching at just the way the horse is going, and if it's in the right outline. And here we go to all that sort of, focusing on the horse and what the horse looks like. Mm-hmm. But you just take a very different approach with your language and the communication skills that you have. Have you always been aware that you were on a different track with this, and that not everybody might get it?
Well, yes. I think I did start out, like I said, as a teenager in dressage lessons, taking clinics from various clinicians from around the world. And I was thrown into the half halt, get your horse more through, get it on the bit, use your seat. I was thrown into that same thing. And like I said, if the penny doesn't drop for me, then I'm definitely going to look for something else. So I didn't really stick with anything at all. So I just pretty much rode on my own. I grew up on horses, as a 5-year-old in the country, and that's, was my obsession. And I rode every single day of my life, pretty much sun up to sundown, especially when school was out. And I'm independent, and I said, well, if that doesn't make sense to me, I'm just going to ride my horse the way that I can come up with myself. And until I met Mary Wanless, really, the first time I was introduced to the way she approaches body awareness and really learning riding skills, not just getting something out of a horse for that day, but really learning the skills and the tools. Like Linda was saying, she's got tools now that she can apply when she has a job to do on a horse that she's riding. She has tools to apply. And I guess it's when I met her, Mary, in, I think it was the early 90s, that it completely made sense to me. So, since then, I've just been on a straightforward path in body awareness riding and learning how to become an effective rider. That is the goal, because horses come and go in our lives. We have many of them, but we have to bring, as much as we can, just excellent riding to each horse we ride. And you're gonna have horses come and go, and you don't want all of your work to just go away with the horse when it goes away. You want to be able to take what you learned to the next horse. So that's the point where I feel like, I've probably been on a different path than the traditional one. And I do feel a little bit like an outsider because of that. But I think what I've learned from Mary and others that have been introduced to her work, which is growing, and it's really growing quite a bit, and it's just highly successful. It just sounds a little weird at first, and I think dressage is a bit of a traditional world. But when you realize the effectiveness of body awareness, it's really hard to argue with, and it gets riders just in so much better place to affect their horses without causing conflicting information. So, I could go on and on and on about this, but I don't think the show is supposed to be 10 hours, so I don't know where I should stop. But I could go on and on. I do like to talk about it. I'm passionate about it. I think body awareness is the reason that we are all out here riding horses. It's really not about the horse. It's about us learning how to be riders. And, so you might want to jump in and stop me so the show doesn't go on too long.
No, we could continue this conversation for sure. Linda, any more thoughts from you on the subject of this language?
Well, I think you made a comment that sometimes riders don't get it. I think anybody who, and I've watched Heather give many, many clinics and watch her work with people, and certainly Mary Wanless as well. And I think if anybody is receptive to this way of approaching their riding and to try to understand the concepts, I've seen pretty consistent success, whereas you certainly see your share of lessons that people take from other instructors and people are finished with the lesson and they're still frustrated. But I think it's very easy to participate in this at many different levels as long as somebody is willing to think a little bit outside of the traditional box and entertain some of these concepts that they probably haven't heard before. I think it's associated with a great deal of success.
Well, I know, Heather, just to round this off, I know that, as you said, although you're a very good communicator, you hesitate to put this into words, into a book or on a video, because it can be misunderstood if it's not correctly applied.
If it's not correctly applied, and if the listener or the watcher or the reader doesn't apply to the lesson that is given, it's just not everything that I would give to Linda in her lesson is something that I might give to you in your lesson. It just depends on what the strengths and weaknesses are in your body, and also, of course, when it comes to the exercise that we put the horses through, everyone has a pretty good concept of that every horse is different, and some need to go more forward, some need to slow more down, some need more suppleness. But when it comes to riders' bodies, Linda's lesson might be totally different than yours. So if somebody was watching me teach Linda and then they thought, I'm going to go home and do that, it might not be for them. So that's where it is a pretty big challenge to write something for the masses when the masses all is comprising individuals are so different. Everybody's so different. It's just a very kind of tailor-made way of approaching each individual in their lesson so that they understand what the words were, what were used in the lesson, and what their body has to do when they think those words. And it is, I don't know, maybe there's a way to do it, to get really specific about what I can say. Everyone should go out and do this. It's hard.
Well, it is a topic that we could... Obviously, we could serialize this, Heather, with there's so many areas that it's fascinating, and obviously would love to have you back. Obviously as co-host, but maybe we could do more training segments like this with students on particular topics. But before I let you go, of course, your friends around the world here, and we have some great fan mail for you, Heather. Lots of really nice comments coming in and from around the world for people who enjoy you being on the show, and of course they follow Paragon as well. So you're going to have to give us an update on HRH Paragon. How's he doing?
Well, I have to say my little scruffy pony is really feeling like a Grand Prix horse now. And it's a great thing. He's just done so well on the small tour in his 2 and only 2 years of competition. And then after the season in Florida, after March was over, then it's been, since then, really, the next thing ahead of us is the Grand Prix. So we've been pushing into different matters of connection and how much he accepts the aids every single stride and not every third stride now. It doesn't sound like much, but it's a huge difference, and he's just become so much more, and I'm going to use these complex words, through and connected and supple. And he's put on muscle. He is now, he's 8 and a few months, so he's still so young, but he has started to feel more adult in his body. And that's been a great thing to feel coming, because he's done so well and he's moved so well, and he's been such a good joy to train a little, ahead of his years, really. And now he feels like everything is just getting solid underneath all of what he knows and what he wants to do. And I think that, today I've had now 5 rides in a row where I just feel like the connection in this horse now is, it's never finished, but I really feel like he is confirmed on connected and through, and that's such an amazing feeling. Really supple, really powerful from behind, and he's just like a machine, and I mean that in a good way. Just whatever I want, there it is. And it's a new level of him being powerful and strong and really technically right there for me. So he's doing really, really, really well.
Well, of course, the interesting sort of cycle of this, Heather, is that he's getting stronger, more muscular, fitter, mature, established, but you're yet still having to work on your core muscles to keep him in the place and put him, enable him to be in the right place all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And it's been about that since the beginning, with such a big horse and long legs and a lot of momentum, huge gaits. And if I didn't have body awareness when I started him out in the beginning, I don't know, where he would be now, but it wouldn't be where he is. And I have to say it was probably more challenging to keep myself organized on his big movement, the greener he was. And now we've gotten to a point of sophistication together that it's still definitely required. But in a sense, it's easier now, because of how much he has formed into a solid, structured, balanced athlete. So it still really comes down to very fine details in the awareness of my body and how it affects him and what I want him to get better doing. But it's more technical now and a little less, like a big, huge, moving, young, greener horse, and now feeling more like a very high technical, highly sophisticated machine that is just, it's hard to describe. I can't imagine how it's going to get better, but I know it is because he's still so young.
I have an analogy for you, Heather. How about synchronized swimming? There's always this smiling faces above the water, but underneath, when they're learning this to do the synchronized swimming, they are paddling like crazy, but they keep smiling.
Yeah, are those smiles or grimaces? Yeah, that's a good analogy. I mean, it doesn't feel bad. It just takes a lot of tone. It does. And same with the ballerina, floating across the stage, so lovely and beautiful, and they're working really, really hard.
Yeah. Well, you make it look very, very easy. And as I said, come back and talk some more about this language and more training sessions here with maybe some of your students. And we can pick up, obviously, a different topic each time, because I'm sure you've got quite an arsenal, Heather.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit.
Yeah. Well, Linda, I want to thank you, too, for joining us this week. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Heather, you're going to come back and see us soon? I should point out that you're travelling like crazy with your clinics, and listeners, if you want to attend as an auditor, you can find Heather's clinic list on her website at heatherblitz.info on the clinics page. It's a busy summer for you for clinics, isn't it, Heather? You're doing a lot of travelling.
It is. I try to get my clinics really going in the summer, because during the winter season here in Florida, I like to be in town with all the shows and busy stuff here, so I really get busy in the summer going on the road. So, yeah, I'll be on the road, but I will be back here on the show hopefully soon.
All right. Well, we look forward to that, Heather. Thank you very much for joining us, as always.
You're welcome.
And one of our new visiting sponsors here on the Dressage Radio Show is Charles Owen, of course, the helmet makers. There's something about Charles Owen that makes its products stand out in a crowd, and it's innovative culture and product development that gives it the edge. And they always have lots of new products. One of those is the Fiona hat that uses the latest fine-grade polystyrene manufacturing techniques. The European Safety Standard approved hat boasts the slimmest proportions in their safety helmet range. It's trimmed to perfection in the finest Italian velvet, together with its slender dimensions. Fiona's hat takes elegance to new heights, whatever your chosen discipline. The top button incorporates 3 ventilation apertures to ensure a high level of comfort during extended periods of use, while the petard's leather harness is anchored at 4 points for a superior fit adjacent to the cheeks. You can find out more about the Fiona hat and all of Charles Owen's products. I mean, they have so many products, and their helmet wear and hat for every occasion, not least of all for dressage riders. So don't forget to check them out at charlesowen.co.uk. We will, of course, put links to all our sponsors on our show notes at dressageradio.com. Well, it's time now for our new segment here on the show, Words of Wisdom. In the 16th century in Italy, Pignatelli was training his students. One of them, Antoine de Pluvinel, went on to serve 4 French kings. However, Pluvinel was not motivated by social climbing. He tried to persuade the kings to support riding academies so that riding masters will not be forced to pay compliments and offer other attractions to the young who are under his tutelage, or sometimes tolerate vices simply to keep them or attract others. Learning influenced by social pressure will never work. He was always talking about the individual's development as a whole. For this, riding was perfect, training the body and the mind, developing physical prowess, but also judgment, honour, courage, even virtue. Virtue, not only physical prowess, will make a master of equitation. Today, we almost seem afraid of these words. Say them at a horse show and riders will physically wince. Winning and figuring out how to win are what counts. Let someone else deal with those cantankerous concepts of spiritual discipline and virtue. However, these ideals cannot be swept under the carpet. They have been a major component and raison d'etre of the classical consensus of dressage from the beginning. Why? Is classical riding so mystical? Is it some mysterious pseudo-religious cult? I think it is almost ridiculously the opposite. It is a very practical pursuit. Modern psychologists say that mastery requires a lot of practice, but it must be the right kind of practice. It must be deliberate, focused, and refined. For optimum learning, there must be opportunities for creative problem-solving. The effort must shift away from well-entrenched methods motivated by external, social, or monetary rewards. This extract is taken from Dressage for the 21st Century by Paul Balasik and published by Trafalgar Square Publishing in 2002. Well, as we come to the end of this week's show, I want to remind you that I am looking for young reporters. If you are under 20 years of age and would like to report on your dressage competition in your neighborhood, then please send me an email, chris@horseradionetwork.com. I want to hear from you. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. And our website has all the links that you'll need from the show notes at dressageradio.com. And you can follow us, of course, on Facebook, as always, and on Twitter, Chris E. Stafford or Horse Radio. Don't forget my email address, chris@horseradionetwork.com. And I will be back at the same time, same place next week. So until then, thank you all for listening.